The Biennale of Sydney is on at the moment. It spans 5 venues across Greater Sydney and features over 80 artists from around the world. It's also pretty weak on installation art this year. But one venue, a regional gallery an hour west of the city, was a huge standout for me. It's probably not a place that most international visitors would think to go, so let's change that. Welcome back to the Installation Art Podcast. If you're new here, this is the #1 and only podcast about installation art, where we usually feature internationally acclaimed practitioners. But in today's bonus episode, we will discuss another Biennale exhibition. We have previously covered Venice and Helsinki, international exhibitions that not all of our listeners get to visit. So here's my report about the 25th Biennale of Sydney. I am your host, Anastasia Parmson. I had the opportunity to join the media preview for Biennale of Sydney this year and spent 10 intense hours visiting all 5 venues across Greater Sydney. I'll be sharing my personal takeaways and opinions on what worked, what didn't, and what we can learn from both. Let's start with some context. Biennale of Sydney is the 3rd oldest biennale in the world, established in 1973 after Venice and Sao Paulo. This year's edition, titled Rememory, is the 25th Biennale of Sydney. I find it interesting that the first 2 cities to follow the Venice model are both in the southern hemisphere, over here in the upside down and away from the center of contemporary art world. Another interesting fact is that Biennale of Sydney has free entry, and the organizers are fighting really hard to keep it that way. It can't be easy in the current environment, but I think it's really important. As a counterpoint example, a single entry ticket to Venice Biennale is €30 this year. Considering that true art enthusiasts couldn't possibly see all of the ticketed Venice shows in one day, that's not cheap. Similarly to others, Biennale of Sydney exhibitions are hosted across multiple venues in the city, but what I think sets Sydney apart from others, especially this year, is that those venues are quite far apart, some 60 kilometers apart. How about we start with the biggest highlight of the Biennale for me this year? Lewers Penrith Regional Gallery. I have warmly recommended to all my local art friends to make the trip and go see it. Why? Because they had the most uplifting works, the best installations, but also the best installed works, even if they weren't installations. The director of the gallery said,
"This is the first year that Lewers Penrith Regional Gallery is one of the partner venues for the Biennale of Sydney. Each year, the gallery welcomes around 120 or 130,000 people to our site. And for many of those people, as you can imagine, located here in the suburbs of their New Plains, this gallery is their first experience with contemporary art, which also means that Rememory will be likely their first experience with any Biennale or international art event ever."
They have a lot of visitors for whom that gallery is their first experience of contemporary art, and they have not taken this responsibility lightly and have been extremely clever and strategic in their curation. The works are very well produced, well executed. They are visually compelling and attractive. They feel accessible and hopeful or uplifting. The video works shown at Penrith are proper video installations, like multi-channel videos with elements included in the space that make it less of a sit-down movie experience, more of an immersive experience. with good soundtrack, etc. I'm not even going to highlight the standout works for me because I just liked everything. I liked the video installations they had there. I liked the buildings. I liked the setting. I especially liked the way all the works were installed in a very, very thoughtful, intentional way that made them feel more accessible, feel more just easy to get into and spend time with. But I can tell you that everyone that I spoke with, everyone's favorite piece was a work by Nora Adwan, a UK artist based in Norway, titled Pomegranates Ruman. It was an installation of ceramic pomegranates with some sound. It was an absolutely lovely and captivating installation. It was well presented. The room it was in really complemented the work. And even more interestingly, if you go deeper into the work, there are sounds recorded in Norway, where the artist lives, and also in Jordan, where her family lives. And there are humidity sensors installed outside, and the installation plays sounds recorded in Norway or in Jordan based on the temperature and humidity levels. If the weather is mild in between the two, then both sounds are blended together. A beautiful work about home and displacement. It feels very warm and cozy and full of empathy and beauty. And I think it really resonates with people. They also have a great gallery shop and cafe and a wonderful setting all around. Historic buildings, lush gardens, quiet greenery. It felt like a wonderful escape. And I feel like that's what biennales should feel like. Like you're stepping into a different world than your normal everyday life. This is probably the last place an international visitor would go seek out on the map of biennale exhibitions, but I would urge you to go there if you can. Lewers Penrith Regional Gallery is a great example of what biennales can be when institutions and curators understand their audience and take installation seriously. A breath of fresh air moment for me of the entire biennale. Another portion of the exhibition is hosted by Chau Chak Wing Museum, which is, by the way, directed by Michael D'Agostino, who is also this year's curator for Australian Pavilion at Venice. It was my first time visiting the Chau Chak Wing Museum. It's an interesting venue because besides the floor that houses the Biennale exhibit, there are other things to see in the museum, but they're not overpowering the Biennale section of it. So there's a lot of things to look at and discover when you go there. But also, I just think that the University of Sydney campus is always a great place to visit. It's got like this old castle, sandstone architecture vibe. Definitely worth going to if you haven't been there yet. Standout works for me. The first thing that you see as you come up the stairs to the venue is a giant textile beaded heart by artist Emma Shin. It is very imposing and captivating. It slowly rotates, and it's the thing that everybody comments on when they see it. And I think it's especially striking if you have seen her smaller works before, because usually she makes hearts that are at 1-to-1 scale. So this giant heart is very prominent. Another work that I found interesting in Chau Chak Wing Museum was a video work by Tuan Andrew Nguyen, The Unburied Sounds of a Troubled Horizon. It's a 58-minute video, kind of like a film, set in Vietnam, depicting the life of a scrapyard scavenger who collects unexploded artillery and believes that she might be the reincarnation of Alexander Calder. The premise is wild and interesting. The video quality is superb, but it is almost an hour long, so I did not have time to watch the whole thing, unfortunately. Next, let's go to Campbelltown Arts Centre. The exhibition here is very tightly centered around Middle Eastern artists, which I guess is directly tied to the curator's background. She is an Emirati Sheikha, Hor Al-Qasimi, who is also involved since many years with the Sharjah Biennial. But it probably also has a lot to do with the demographics of Campbelltown and that area, which is, I think, very clever. The Campbelltown exhibition is prominent in what I would call documentary style works, several photographic documentation displays, and one video. The video itself I found very interesting, and I actually spent most of my time there watching that. It is Asylum of Our Dreams by Lebanese artists, and I'm sorry I won't pronounce their names correctly, Joanna Haji Thomas and Khalil Yorege. It's a video accompanied by embroideries. It's not immediately clear that they're connected, and the video itself is 25 minutes long. It basically takes a form of a documentary, and it depicts the retelling of a journey of 4 or 5 Lebanese men who attempted the crossing from Indonesia to Australia to find better life. And the men themselves talk about the trials they faced at sea and in the detention center on Christmas Island before getting deported back to Lebanon. And the embroideries are made by 5 women commissioned by the artists to depict the sea. It is a very compelling story. The film is well produced and well narrated by the men themselves. It was an interesting watch, but I am still questioning, where is the line between documentary and contemporary art? Should documentary type films and photo dioramas have a place in museums? I am not sure. I could have just as well watched that video on ABC or on YouTube or something. Is adding embroideries installed on plinths to represent the water that they battled with enough to turn a documentary into an installation artwork? Question mark. I don't know. What do you think? Next up, Art Gallery of New South Wales. The exhibition there is divided in 2. One part is in the old wing and another is in the new wing. I really liked the video work by Polish artist based in Sydney, Kuba Dorabialski. It's a 30-minute short film featuring Mia Wasikowska as a fictional Polish-Australian writer who travels to Sarajevo to work on her new novel about a family hiding in a forest during the Bosnian War. Again, the film was extremely well produced, super high quality video. According to the artist's bio, his aim is to blur the lines between video art and cinema, which I think job accomplished in this case. Another work that I enjoyed at the Art Gallery of New South Wales is by Palestinian artist based in Paris, Taisir Batniji. It's a pile of engraved soaps titled No Condition is Permanent. I really wanted one of those soaps, but unfortunately you can't just take them. There are certain times during gallery opening hours when somebody is handing them out to the audience, and I happened to not be there at that time. Bummer. I also like the work by Canadian artist Kapwani Kiwanga titled Flowers for Africa, which consists of 13 bouquets of fresh flowers. Beautiful, delicate, and real flowers. Some of them just placed on a plinth, not even in a vase with water. I cannot imagine what they will look like by the time this exhibition ends, because when I saw this installation a day before the Biennale opened, and some of the flowers were already starting to look a little bit sad. So I think that's what's interesting about it. And it kind of also ties into the soap work, No Condition is Permanent. Overall, the portion of the Biennale at Art Gallery of New South Wales just feels a bit disparate and lost among everything else that you can see and do at the gallery. The Ron Mueck show was on at the time. The Mike Hewson record-breaking underground park is stealing all the limelight. The Biennale portion just feels a bit dry and small and forgettable in comparison. I think when a Biennale shares space with a major institution's other programming, it risks getting overshadowed. This wasn't an issue at the Chau Chak Wing Museum because the Biennale portion had one whole floor. I am not sure why the Museum of Contemporary Art, MCA, was not part of the Biennale this year. It could have something to do with the fact that they've started charging entry fees for all their exhibitions. Don't even get me started on this topic. Let's move on. But I feel like it would be actually a better place to share whatever programming they have with a Biennale exhibition, because the architecture is better suited for creating a clear division of themes and exhibitions between the levels than at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, which has just become so massive. Hey, a quick intermission to thank everyone who has filled out our listener poll so far. Your feedback has been really helpful. And if you haven't done it yet, I would love to hear from you. It only takes a few minutes, it's anonymous, and the link is in the show notes. Or you can leave me a voice message at speakpipe.com/installationartpodcast. Your input is very important and it will help shape the future of this show. And finally, the main part of the Biennale of Sydney is housed at the White Bay Power Station. It is a historic venue that probably draws many visitors just to see the space, more so than for the art, which is not a bad thing in itself. But from my observations and personal experience, the space can often outshine the art. I have seen many visitors there looking at the machinery with at least as much interest as looking at the artworks. In fact, even I found myself photographing some tiles on the wall that just looked really interesting, like they could have been an artwork. I have talked about this challenge before, and it is very evident here, especially this year. Old historic venues are great for housing art, specifically installation art, but it has to be created and executed in a very intentional way. Otherwise, it is swallowed by the venue. Having been to see the exhibition at White Bay twice now, I also noted that some works completely lose their visual interest, like part of their whole installation idea, depending on time of day and the amount of light streaming in through the huge factory windows. Some of them only work in a controlled light setting, dimmed with spotlights and shadows. The daylight just breaks the work. You kind of just walk past it like, meh. That is a huge oversight. I've said this before and I will say it again. Biennials may or may not be better off when housed on an island. I have to agree with the Australian art critic Christopher Allen, who, by the way, wrote a rather scathing review of this year's Biennale. I will put a link to it in the show notes, but it is behind a paywall. But if you go to removepaywall.com, you may be able to read it. Just a little tip. Yeah, he said in his review that Sydney was arguably better off when it was housed on Cockatoo Island. There is something really special about taking a ferry to an art exhibition. You see the Sydney Harbour, you get some fresh air, you see Sydney from a different angle that you don't usually see. It's like going on an adventure. Cockatoo Island is a much larger place than White Bay Power Station. The exhibition was housed in multiple buildings across the island. So you kind of make a day of it. You walk between the buildings, and as you do that, you kind of clear your head, make space for more art. There's more room to be surprised and delighted by coming across an art installation where you didn't necessarily expect it. There's also more variety in the spaces that can house artworks that mightn't necessarily be suitable for a huge industrial cavernous space filled with old machinery. And although, sure, getting to an island requires a ferry, so it's not the easiest, most straightforward, getting to White Bay is also not that easy. It's actually kind of annoying every time I go there. It's in a part of Sydney where there's no train lines. There's also no parking at the venue, which is challenging in a city that is designed for cars. There is nowhere where you can easily pull over when you're taking a ride share in front of the main entrance. And getting there by bike is a little bit frustrating. Even though there are plenty of bike paths in almost all directions from the venue, the last bit before you get to the power station, you have to cross several major roads with like 2-minute wait times at each red light. It's just so incredibly annoying. The signage isn't great on the bike paths, so you can easily get lost. Let's say it's a work in progress. I have seen improvements, but it's not there yet. Also, a side note, when I was there last, I did see an old school double-decker bus outside the venue picking people up. I think it might be a free shuttle. If it is, great. I don't know where it goes. I couldn't find any information about it on the Biennale website. But let's get back to the art and what you can actually see at White Bay Power Station. It is very video heavy this year and a lot of long form video. In fact, I believe somebody calculated and it came to something like 5 hours of watch time. I think that's a huge disservice to the artists who are exhibiting there to put all those videos together like that. Who is going to go to an art exhibition and watch 5 hours of heavy and kind of slow video work? I don't know anyone who would do that. Do you? To quote a layman exhibition visitor, if I wanted to watch TV, I would have stayed at home. Ouch. There is one video work there that I did find very well installed. It's by Irish artist Frank Sweeney, called Go Ye Afar. It's a video projection of about 24 minutes with rows of bus seats in pairs installed in front of it. Each seat had a pair of headphones for the audio, and the video followed a taxi driver on some kind of a surreal voyage through the streets of Dublin in Ireland and Calabar in Nigeria. I think the installation itself was an interesting proposition. It was visually inviting, and people did go and sit, even like strangers sitting next to each other on these bus seats using the headphones. Like, it was quite popular. Not everyone was able to find a seat. So I was like, okay, I am going to take my time with this work. I sat down in the bus seat, and a few minutes later, the video ended. That's fine. I'll just, you know, watch the beginning of it. There were several people around me who had the same thought. But instead of just looping and starting again immediately, there was like a 5 to 6 minute waiting time before the next start of the video. Why would you do that? Who is going to sit there looking at a blank screen for 5 minutes, waiting for this video to start, to then spend an unknown amount of time watching it? I have never seen anything like this in a museum before, except maybe if there's like a super important documentary that adds context to the whole show and there are advertised screening start times all over the place. That was not a good idea. So I walked away and I forgot about it and I didn't come back to see it. It's terrible. It was kind of depressing, actually. Yeah. Also, a side note about information about each individual artwork. Unless you go to the exhibition and photograph the wall text that's provided, there is no way of finding information on Biennale's website about which artist made which work, any information about the work. It made it really difficult to research this episode. So, Biennale of Sydney, please do better. We need more information about what you're exhibiting after the show's open than just the artist's bio on their page. But back to the art. There is a sound installation at the power station. It's in a room that's kind of open on two sides. There are about a dozen speakers mounted in a circle pointing toward the middle of the space. I love audio installations, and this one's by Hui Ye. It's called The Chant, and it's a multi-channel installation that goes for 11 minutes and 18 seconds. But there is a flaw with the setup. The most I've seen anyone stay with it at the moment is like 15 seconds. There's nowhere to sit, and there's nothing to keep people's attention in the space to keep them longer. So no one would ever actually experience the full 11 minutes of it. This is a shame because it's quite cool. The way it is installed does a major disservice to the beautiful sound because it's very difficult to just stand around in a bare concrete room with nothing else to do, nothing that facilitates your immersion and that invites you to take time with the work. I will include some pictures of the space in the YouTube version of this episode so you have an idea of what was there to look at while you're absorbed into this 11-minute work. And then there was one work. I will not name the names, but I'm sure you can figure it out if you want to. It kind of made me mad. Here's what it looks like. It's several pieces of kind of looks like laminated canvas cut into these organic-y shapes that are supposed to represent sweet potatoes. And on one side, they have this kind of a bit illegible handwritten text. The other side looks like the canvas lamination is bubbling up. It's a bit dirty. It's not treated. And the pieces of canvas are unsupported. They are curling from the edges, hung from the ceiling, so they're just kind of waving and twirling around. They also look small and lost in the space they're installed in, and the space is cordoned off so you can't get closer to them and walk among them. They're also backlit by a large window. And the quality of the work, the way it's made, just looks like a student work. I don't think this is the kind of choice of materials and scale and execution that is acceptable at this level of international exhibition. There was another work that was a really large installation. People who would come in and see it weren't really sure that it was all one work because the parts of it just look really disparate. Very different materials, very different quality. One is kind of like a hut talking about American slavery. The hut is very well built, very realistic installation of an old dwelling. And then around it are these long sheets of fabric suspended from the ceiling and a tree made of fabric. And they look a bit more rushed or like trying to fill the space maybe, but don't really connect with the hut visually in any way. Overall, the exhibition at White Bay Power Station kind of felt a little fatalistic rather than contemporary commentary. A lot of the works felt out of context for Sydney, and there's a lot of heavy topics. Like, there's works about slavery and incarceration and imperialism, but I didn't really see a direct link to contemporary Australia in many of the works. I mean, maybe I'm just missing something. Maybe I didn't spend enough time with the works. It's totally possible. But several people commented that they came away feeling like it was very heavy, very doom and gloomy. Another layman's quote from somebody who's not an art person who said, "A lot of causes, but not much to look at." That said, I have also seen comments from people who really liked it, who were very touched by the exhibition, who were in tears in front of some of the works at White Bay. So that just goes to show that not all art is for everyone, and some people really found something profound in there. Maybe it just wasn't for me this year. And it also really fell short on the installation front, which is my main area of interest. There were no showstoppers as far as I'm concerned. Long-form video dominated, but also the documentary style. But when does documentation become art? Where is that point of transformation, that détournement, like I like to say? All that said, there's certainly something for everyone. You should go see for yourself and make up your own mind. I hope this episode will help you decide which venue to prioritize. If you haven't been to Penrith Regional Gallery, I highly recommend taking that trip. Or maybe just venture out of your regular stomping grounds to see a Biennale exhibition somewhere you've never been before. This Biennale is on until 14th of June 2026, so you still have plenty of time to go see it. And if you're outside of Australia, wondering if you should plan a trip here that coincides with the next Biennale in 2028, I mean, of course, I think you definitely should. There's nothing better than traveling for art. In conclusion, there are definitely many things that Biennale of Sydney gets right. The free entry is a huge one. The exhibitions spread across multiple venues, including in Western Sydney, and the regional galleries further afield. The fact that the venues do change with each iteration. I think that's very smart, and it opens the Biennale up to people in parts of Sydney who would probably otherwise never go to the Biennale, and that is great. This Biennale demonstrates something that I think has come up time and time again in this podcast. Installation art lives or dies in the execution. You can have interesting ideas, important topics, prestigious artists and venues, but if the lighting is wrong, if there's nowhere to sit down, if the space swallows the work, if viewers can't really access it or get into it, it doesn't matter. The art doesn't work. And that is usually not the artist's fault. I left Lewers Penrith Regional Gallery energized and grateful for institutions that understand that installation is not important just for installation art. It can make or break the visitor's experience of a video work, a ceramic work, even a painting. I left White Bay Power Station a bit frustrated by missed opportunities. Not all artworks are able to stand their ground in any context they're placed in. This is where site-specific installation really shines, and it's the job of a curator and the team to install it in a way, especially at an international show where maybe the artist cannot be personally present to install it in the best light possible. But I would love to hear what you thought if you've been to the Biennale. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? You can get in touch via DM on Instagram at Installation Art Podcast or leave a voice message on speakpipe.com/Installation Art Podcast. In the next episode, we'll be back talking to somebody very special who is really good at creating works that stand their own ground wherever they may be placed. I will be interviewing an actual art world legend and installation art pioneer, Donna Dennis. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for tuning in to this detour to the Biennale of Sydney. Don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening, and until next time.